Hi everyone, how are you all doing? It's nice to see you all here. I have been working really hard trying to figure out the spring equinox observance. This is going to be a little bit different to the Imbolc one, um, in the way that we will be doing some spell works and magical workings. Oh my God, I had so many ideas that it took me a day at least to just narrow it down to what I thought would be good for everyone. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's on the 20th of March. Let me check my calendar because I don't want to tell you the wrong date. Although you know it will be on the calendar. It's on the 20th. It's actually on the spring equinox. 7 o'clock, 20th, which is a Thursday, 20th of March. I'm so looking forward to it. It's going to be really fun. Okay, well, welcome to today's fireside sessions. Today we're looking at the soul. So um, I don't know about you, but when I was first introduced to the idea of non-linear time, it left me with loads of questions about, well, what happens with the soul? You know, non-linear time, is the soul, does it exist forever? Does it exist past physical death? Um, I wondered if my own cultural sort of conditioning had an effect on how we saw the soul, if I saw it in a particularly Christian light, which I did. And I did a deep dive exploration into various soul concepts from around the world, which is what we're going to look at today. But it did answer a lot of questions and it made a lot more sense. And I'm hoping that if you were left with the same questions about soul after our nonlinear time talk, that this might give you a few more perspectives to research and look into for yourself. So let me share my screen. Give me a second, guys. Push that over there. Okay. So yeah, it's a good one to start off with is how you feel, or if you feel that the ways of your cultural or religious upbringing, or even social upbringing, has influenced your perception of the soul. I think it's a good place to start. It's also a little bit of an odd one because I do think that we are all brought up with one particular mindset. The soul and the constructs and the concepts of the soul aren't often discussed. Um, and I think because of that, we can get stuck into a linear sort of pattern of thinking. But for me, one of the other things was that I was questioning is, are our souls meant to learn and experience, especially if you struggle with really difficult experiences and you genuinely sitting there thinking, why did that happen to me? Were we meant to experience that? Was that a learning point for our sort of soul contract to fulfill a certain destiny, if you believe in that? Anyway, we're going to deep dive. So, yeah, questions of the soul, other things. How can the soul be both ancestral and reincarnated? That blew my mind. If we're thinking about nonlinear time and we're looking at past lives versus ancestral lives, how can the soul be part of both? It's an interesting one. And I'm not going to present you with any one correct answer. We're going to examine various different concepts from around the world. And is it possible for souls to experience events from both past and future? Because the other thing that we were introduced to in the nonlinear time talk was pulling resources of support from ancestors, but also pushing healing towards ancestors, and then doing the same for descendants, for people in the future, for our children's children's children. We are the ancestors of the future. So is it possible then for our soul to experience both past, present, and future, or past and future, as well as the present? Or is it anchored into the present? So in this session, we're going to be looking at various cultural perspectives of the soul that significantly contrast the Western idea of the soul being singular in the framework of like that linear time concept. In cultures like Mongolian shamanism and Ifa, the soul is seen as a part of or just a small part of a complex, interconnected universe, which is contrasting to that linear progression of life to afterlife that we see in the West. Anthropologically, these traditions often view the soul as communally and ancestrally interconnected, rather than based on the premise of individual salvation. And historically and socially, the beliefs and concepts are embedded within rich, ongoing cultural and spiritual practices and are part of everyday life, unlike the often more compartmentalized religious practices in the West. So as we go through this, I encourage you to reflect on your own soul's journey, what you have experienced so far, what you have knowing about, and whether your interactions with other people feel particularly intrinsic or intuitive compared to others or other experiences. So the first one we're going to look at is Mongolian shamanism. Mongolian shamanism talks about the soul as the soul triad. The Ami soul, which is the first part of it, it regulates the breathing and the bodily functions, and it enters the body at birth and it leaves at death. It's typically considered very unstable, particularly in children, and it's often the part of the soul involved in cases of soul loss. So when the shamans talk about soul healing, the Ami soul is the one that will need the healing, need the work. It's often visualized as bird-like, and it's linked to the upper world and the breath. In Siberian cultures, the Ami is secured inside the body by tattooing a picture of a bird. So that's a whole nother session that we could look at, actually, is spiritual tattoos, which is also super interesting. But the Ami soul, it lives as a bird on the world tree between incarnations. So it does incarnate, but it follows the family line. So it's an ancestral incarnation, and it carries reincarnation memories, often mistaken for genetic memories. The Ami soul is shared between identical twins. So identical twins will share one Ami soul, and is often sort of considered why there's often telepathic sort of connection and knowing between identical twins. And the Ami soul is also present, or thought to be present, in animals. So hunting practices respect, in Mongolia and in Siberia, respect the Ami's reincarnation cycle. And there are special rituals and honorings that allow the animal's Ami soul to ascend and reincarnate. The second soul in the soul triad is the sun's soul, which can be attacked or broken and is often involved in soul retrieval. So again, if we're looking at soul healing, this is a part of your soul that has been left, possibly through really, I'm trying to find my words, sorry, really difficult experiences or difficult connections with other people. You might have left part of your soul around. So part of the soul healing process is to gather and retrieve parts of your soul from experiences, from people and connections, to cut off the ties and to retrieve your soul. So the sun soul reincarnates without following any specific lineage. It's linked to the lower world, and it's similar to karma in the way that it determines the soul's fate and succession of incarnations. So depending on how you have behaved and your experiences in this life, the sun soul will jump to another experience or reincarnate as another experience in order to encourage you to live certain experiences so that you can, gather a rounded experience of everything. So it sort of is seeking to fill in the gaps of your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom. So the sun soul is overseen by the deity Oleg Khan, who is responsible for deciding reincarnation, deciding upon people's reincarnation based on the past deeds, and can destroy evil souls. So, there's a possibility that if someone is particularly vicious and evil in a lifetime, that their sun soul will be extinguished. It's often visualized, the sun soul is often visualized as traveling through water and is associated with the spirit of water animals. This also has links to how we associate or correspond water to spiritual connections or connections in general. In the West, there are historical links that pull from shamanism throughout the world. And this is one of the reasons why we have that link to water, that spiritual link to water. The sun soul can also fragment into up to 13 parts, which doesn't that trigger a movie reference, anyone? Harry Potter with the Horcruxes, where he splits his soul out. She did her research, I'll give her that. So the sun soul can fragment into 13 parts. Usually it stays whole, but loss of parts of it will weaken the human. And it will weaken them, but it doesn't typically lead to soul loss. That's more of an Ami soul thing. The sun soul is dominant in human consciousness, often the source for reincarnation memories. It influences the mental state through its presence in nature and after death. We can see an example of how the soul can be both ancestral with the Ami, both ancestral with the Ami and following the specific blood lineage, and a reincarnation attached to past life theories with the sun soul being determined by karma and fate. So we can see how the past life versus the ancestral life with the Ami and the suns, we can see how those souls can follow those different lineages in this example. And then the souled soul, which is the last portion of the triad, represents individual personality and consciousness. It's non-reincarnating, but continues existing in nature. So post-death, it finds residence in natural elements like trees, rocks, rivers, and it continues to interact with the living world. It begins at birth and is shaped only by the present life experiences and adds complexity and depth to the human consciousness. After death, it will join the other souled souls in nature and can become spiritual entities known as Uda, that are typically known for aiding shamans. So shamans will call upon souled souls to help them navigate between the worlds and gather information and find souls for other people, for soul healing, etc., etc. The souled soul has a mild effect on the influence. It has a mild influence on our living, unless it's invoked for specific purposes. It can influence the mental states of people through its natural residence. It typically resides at the crown of the head. So touching this area in Mongolian shamanism and Siberian shamanism, touching the crown of the head is very taboo. Hats usually cover this part and are treated with absolute respect. But obviously we see this in a number of religions and spiritual beliefs throughout the world, is the crown being covered, because I'm not going to say, I'm going to say most religions and spiritual belief systems, the crown is what connects us with universal consciousness. And it's also an entry point for spirits and other energies, positive or negative. So we see that covering of the head, whether it be a head wrap or I've forgotten the name of it, but in multiple areas around the world, we see that crown being covered. But the soul, its departure from the body when we die, its departure is immediate with death. And this indicates that it is absolutely critical for our role in life maintenance. If we don't have our soul, we fail to exist. We no longer exist. So this is just one example of the 5 that we are looking at. This soul triad is a very, I felt like this was a really good one to start with, to start the idea of seeing this multi-layered presence of the soul. It's not just one soul. It doesn't just begin at birth and end with death. There are different souls pulling into one to form one experience or incarnation for a human. So the next one we're going to look at is the 9-layered soul of Ifa. Ifa is the Yoruba tradition or religious belief system, which is one of them. And the multi-layered soul reflects the complexity of the human experience, akin to numerology's emphasis on the 9 as a cycle of completion. It's inspired by ancient beliefs like the Mayas' 9-layered underworld, and tributes the goddess Oya, known as the Mother of 9. Oya is actually the deity or the goddess responsible for looking after us once we've passed over. She is the keeper of the cemeteries, and she is very revered and very respected, as are all the deities, but she is just one of the powerful deities in the Ifa belief system. So the universal soul, which starts the 1 of 9, connects humans with the cosmic forces and the universe's energy. It originates from the Big Bang, symbolizing our elemental bond with the universe. The human soul links to our physical form, and also links our physical form to the cosmic energy, to the universal soul. So they're all linked. But the human soul emphasizes the shared human journey from conception to death and highlights our collective fate, our collective fate. We are all in it together. And that is one of the big things in Ifa, from my knowledge and my teachers, is that I've seen that it's absolutely vital to work together as a team, support everyone, and work as a collective. The sexual soul typically determines gender during fetal development, and it represents the choice and implications of gender identity, influencing personal and collective gender experiences. The racial soul defines physical characteristics and racial traits. It bestows talents and predispositions influenced by racial heritage and environmental factors. The astral soul governs the relationship with the natural forces and the astrological influences. It shapes our personal temperament and life experiences through connections with the Orisha, who are the deities of the Ifa, the Orisha, or astrological configurations. So astrology and the sky is just as important in Ifa as the Orisha. The national soul expresses cultural and political identity, and it can foster ethnocentrism or promote global peace, reflecting social dynamics and collective identity. So this is another big one for anyone that practices Ifa, is to constantly do work to promote global peace. Everyone I have known that has practiced Ifa is truly one of the most beautiful religions I've ever experienced. Everyone I know actively works, is part of their job, They all have jobs, well, most of them have jobs in which they are benefiting or working to make the world better, whether that is soil regeneration, whether that is having community prayer services. It is everything they do is about giving back and helping everyone and making the world better. The ancestral soul transmits genetic and behavioral traits through family lines. So this is where we're talking about connection with the ancestors. It contains generational blessings or curses and influences our physical and physiological conditions. So again, as just as much as the Orisha, just as much as the stars and the constellations in the sky, just as much as community. Another thing is knowing where you came from, knowing how you got here, and continually revering and venerating the ancestors. The historical soul, 8 of the 9, captures generational identity influenced by historical and political context. So what we experienced at the time, there's a belief that when you die and you choose to reincarnate, you can choose to reincarnate during a particular time so that you experience and you are here and you are present in order to make a change during a particular experience that is happening. So, for instance, my teacher, Yeye, believes that she has been she opted to come into this experience at this time so she could oversee the work of saving the waters from all the pollution, getting everyone to work together. She lived through the Black Panther movement. She lived through the Black Lives Matter movement. It's very important to her that historically, and she really does believe that she chose to be here to do that work in this time. So this is this reflects back on the what we were saying before with the Mongolian shamanism is believing that your soul has a contract to have certain experiences fulfilled in order to better the world, better your soul, better your experience, and also create a better world for those that come after you. But the historical soul, is affected by overarching astrological or societal shifts, such as those seen in different decades, so the era of, etc. And then the final soul, the guardian soul, offers guidance, protection, and counsel, and aims to integrate the individual with other soul layers, the broader world, and their destiny. So the guardian soul is your own guide, your own inner guide. These layers represent quite a comprehensive inheritance that influences and shapes every individual. We interact with and contribute to these layers throughout our lives, in our everyday existence, enhancing our spiritual and earthly journey. So, Tibetan Buddhism, some of you may already be aware of this, is again made up of the 3. We have another soul triad, the La, which literally translates to soul, represents the essence of basic human qualities and the balance of elemental energies. Its function is to determine human nature and capacity, underpinning vitality and inner strength. It is influenced by moral integrity and personal actions. It can be damaged or enhanced by life experiences such as humiliation or success. Damage manifests as soul loss and affects our psychological, physical, and energetic states. The Yi then is the emotional aspect of the soul, responsible for feelings such as joy, sadness, trust, or mistrust. It acts as the reflective surface for the capacities and qualities of the La, or our goodness, experiencing and expressing these emotions. And then the last of the triad is the SEM, which represents the active conceptual mind, which with the capacity to understand, to judge, and to decide and make a choice. Its effectiveness is directly influenced by the conditions of the La and the Yi, dependent on their health and their balance, which is why it's so important to work out your elemental energies and keep them consistently balanced as much as you can. It's the very foundation of Buddhism, is to keep your elemental energies moderated all the time. The idea of SEM, the SEM soul being influenced by past actions and future outcomes, shows that the soul may engage with future events beyond our conventional understanding of time. These three souls cannot be separated. They must be considered together in shamanic practice, because the health of one is dependent on the health of all three. And if the health of all three is related to the balance of the elements. So again, everything is about keeping your elemental energies in balance. We do see another version of this in Tibetan Buddhism. The La remains the same. It's the soul. It acts as the foundation of basic positive human qualities and karmic capacity. But then we have the Tzi, which is the lifespan, which represents the potential lifespan of an individual. It's subject to enhancement or damage, reflecting the variable nature of life's duration. And then we have the life force, the Sok. The life force closely related to the innate awareness known as Rigpa, characterized by its boundless and identity-less nature. It can be diminished by aversion or enhanced by appreciation of beauty, of positive experiences, etc., which feed and strengthen life force. So each element, La, Tzi, and Sok, plays a crucial role in defining the spiritual and physical life of individuals, emphasizing the importance of balance and interaction between them for holistic well-being. So we're back over to Africa now to look at the Dahomey tradition. So ancestors influence human life through hereditary, physical, and personal traits, and continue to exist and create in the spirit world. In the Dahomey tradition, ancestors' energies find a home in the wood that groans and can be reborn under the right circumstances, maintaining a connection between the living and the living dead. So again, we're looking at a multi-layered soul here. The C is the multi-layered soul that is central to individual life and spiritual identity. The Da is the energy that underpins creation, acting as a force field where creation occurs. The Wudon, which represents the goddess or the embodiment of nature within the Dahomey belief system. Side note, Wudon is also referenced in the words Wudon is in Voudon, and also voodoo. This is where those practices come from. Voodoo, side note, voodoo equals goddess. Voodoo is not some black magic evil practice. It is actually a very, very beautiful practice. Joto is a layer of spirit and intelligence passed down from ancestors, providing guidance and wisdom. The Salado is the unique personality traits that are inherent in a person, predetermined by ancestral lineage. The Yi is the physical characteristics inherited from ancestors, which leave the body and recombine with Joto and Salado at death. So the physical characteristics inherited from ancestors leave the body and combine with the unique personality traits that are inherent in a person, predetermined by ancestral lineage, and the layer of spirit and intelligence passed down from ancestors for guidance and wisdom at death. All of those things merge together after death. The Kapoli is the destiny that blends with the sea, which is the multi-layered soul that is central to the individual life and spiritual identity. Kapoli blends with the sea, shaping the individual's life path. So we can see that the interaction between different parts of the soul are responsible for different functions and different experiences, and they all have different jobs to do, different purposes. And the Sekpoli, which is the Yi, the Saledo, and the Joto, represents the destiny of a newly formed soul, a baby, combining all elements, physical traits, personality, and ancestral spirit. So a newborn child will embody these three key forms. The Se is revitalized by the mother creator and blends with the Kapoli to form the Sekpoli, defining the newborn's destiny and spiritual identity. So probably one of the most complex soul systems in this presentation, but really interesting, and in the way that all these parts of the soul interact with each other to produce different experiences, create different things. It's very much almost like a potion of soul. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And then this one, Kabbalah, I put this in. I was trying to ensure that I had a widespread selection of soul concepts to provide you. And I ummed and ahed over putting this in because Kabbalah is a practice within a wider practice. It's part of it's Jewish mysticism. So it's part of the Jewish tradition, unlike the others, which are from, the primary belief systems. This is sort of a side path. But Kabbalah is so widely referenced in tarot, in various divination practices, and in spiritual paths, Hermeticism, and path working and things like that. So I thought I would put it in here in case you want a bit more information and you just happen to be stumbling across Kabbalah, in your spiritual development. If you're stumbling across it, this might be helpful to you. So the soul in Kabbalistic tradition is complex and consists of multiple layers, again, each serving different spiritual functions and connected to the divine. So this is the tree of life here, but we actually work from the ground up. So nefesh is the lowest part of the soul. It's associated with the life force of the physical body, and its vital instincts and physical survival are anchored in the blood and most directly connected to bodily life, to our physical human existence. It's sort of like I suppose it could be linked to the root chakra. It could also be linked to the blood. It's the life force that physically runs through our veins. The ruach, I'm not going to pretend I know the pronunciations of these words, is the emotional aspect of the soul and deals with more moral virtues and desires. So it sits between the nefesh and the higher parts of the soul, acting as the mediator by integrating emotions and moral judgments. The neshama is the breath of life. So this is part of the higher soul. It's connected to intellectual and divine pursuits, and it provides humans with the ability to discern and connect to spiritual realms, offering an understanding of the divine and the deeper meanings of the Torah. Then we have the chaya or the kea. Again, not au fait with the pronunciation, so forgive me. This is the aura, which is interesting. We haven't seen this yet. The aura, or the etheric part of the soul that transcends personal spirituality. So its function is to represent a higher level of soul consciousness that interconnects with all creation, reflecting the divine life force. So this, I think, would be similar to, the universal consciousness, our ability to open up the crown, chakra and to download universal consciousness and receive consciousness from elsewhere. And then finally, we have the Yachida sitting at the top, which is the innermost part of the soul. Again, we're looking at that layering aspect, the innermost part of the soul, the essence that is uniquely one with God. So this is our own inner higher self. It is the purest expression of the soul and embodies absolute unity with the divine essence. So each layer of the soul interacts with others, contributing to a person's spiritual journey from the physical to the moral to the intellectual and the divine. The journey through the layers of the soul is a process of spiritual purification and enlightenment, aiming for higher levels of understanding and connection to the divine. Again, through these examples, we can start building an idea as to how reincarnation might not be a sequential journey, but could involve overlapping experiences that blur the lines between past, present, and future lives. Okay, so now we've seen 5 examples from all around the world on the constructs of the soul, the multi-layered soul, not just one soul. How do these insights into the soul concepts change your view or help you embrace a deeper understanding of the soul and help you develop your spiritual practice? Are there any soul concepts that stood out to you that you felt like you had an inner knowing of? I think for me, the Mongolian shamanism, the very first slide that we looked at with the Ami, the soul, and the sons, was the most reflective of how I felt inside. It certainly made a lot of sense to me when I learned about that one. But these are some reflection points. I'm gonna stop the recording now, and we're all gonna have a discussion about how these insights have perhaps given space for us to explore how the soul looks to us, how we feel our souls are, and if we feel like everyone's can reflect each other's, which I think is another interesting question. If you're watching back, then please take this slide here as an opportunity to do some journaling of your own. And I look forward to hearing any insights that you have soon. Lots of love to you all. And we're going to go and discuss everything now.